It was caused by rapid growth in industry submissions not matched by corresponding investment in the FDA generic review program. This was ultimately fixed by the User Fee Act that was passed by Congress, but takes some time for us to dig out of this hole, and it will take a bit more time before we are fully caught up. Nevertheless, applications that have been submitted in the last 2 years, 2014 and fiscal year 15, have a 15-month review clock that we expect to make. And by this October, we will have a 10-month review clock. So an application submitted this October or beyond, we would expect to completely finish the review and get back to the sponsor in 10 months. It is the older applications that we need to clean up, and we are working very hard and very successfully at doing that. The purpose of Hatch-Waxman was to introduce high-quality, FDA-approved competition into the market to improve access for patients. 65% of drugs have generic competition right now, and another 24% are still protected by patents or exclusivity, so they are not yet eligible for generic competition. 10% have no protection, either patent or exclusivity, but lack generic competition and lack applications submitted to the FDA. 2% have ANDAs applications with the FDA awaiting approval. Those are all expedited. We expedite all first generics, and those are all moving through the process and getting review and so forth. Under the GDUFA system, we have the potential to get on the market very fast because these first generics are prioritized and all applications will have a 10-month review clock. Now, I am, as you said, scheduled to testify at a second hearing this morning beginning at 10:30, and I may need to depart before all committee questions have been answered. So Mr. Keith Flanagan, who's director of the Office of Generic Policy, will be able to answer any technical questions about the generic program after I leave. So I thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Shkreli, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Chaffetz, Congressman Cummings, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify. I've been with Valeant since 2011, first as CFO, then on the board, and now as interim CEO. Over this time, Valeant has grown substantially. Today, we're a large, innovative pharmaceutical company that employs 22,000 people around the world, including 6,000 in the United States. We have about 1,800 products, including 200 prescription drugs in the U.S. We're a leading dermatology, gastroenterology, ophthalmology, and consumer healthcare company. Our flagship brands like Bausch + Lomb, Jublia, and CeraVe are known to many Americans. We have a large U.S. presence, including 16 manufacturing sites, and we're making significant investments in the United States. In Rochester, New York alone, we've invested more than $250 million to upgrade the plant and added nearly 200 jobs. And we expect to invest $500 million more over the coming years and add 630 jobs. We have heard very clearly Congress's and the public's concerns about drug prices in the industry generally and Valeant's increases in prices, including for 2 of our drugs, Nitropres and Isuprel. And we're responding to those concerns. We created a volume-based rebate program providing up to a 30% discount for Nitropres and Isuprel. And we just launched a 20-year partnership with Walgreens that will provide a 10% average price reduction for branded dermatology and ophthalmology products and a price reduction for up to 95% on certain branded drugs where there is a generic. These steps are in addition to the existing patient assistance programs which help ensure that out-of-pocket expenses don't prevent eligible patients from receiving the medicines they need. We expect to spend more than $1 billion in 2016 on patient assistance. I'd like to specifically address the pricing of Nitropres and Isuprel, which are cardiac drugs used in the hospital procedures, which there is a fixed rate of reimbursement by payers. These are not drugs purchased by patients in a pharmacy. When we acquired them, we commissioned an outside pricing consultant to review the market. They concluded that Nitropres and Isuprel were clinically very valuable to hospitals and patients, and that the fixed reimbursement rates allowed for significant price increases without eliminating a hospital's profits. Based on these findings, we implemented significant price increases. Since then, we've experienced about a 30% reduction in volume as hospitals move to alternative drugs. The volume discounts we've implemented will help address the needs of those hospitals that are large users of these drugs. Now, let me say a word about commitment to research and development. Valeant's R&D results make us a leader in the industry. Our productivity, drugs approved per R&D dollar spent, is 7 times higher than the average of the 15 companies with the most new drug approvals. In just the last 2 years, Valeant has launched 76 new prescription drugs, generic drugs, medical devices, and other products in the United States. And there is more to come from our robust U.S. pipeline, which has more than 200 active programs. We expect approvals this year of a significant novel treatment for glaucoma and a biologic for the treatment of moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. We believe that R&D should focus on outputs and should not be judged by spending alone. Nonetheless, our R&D spending is significant, expected to exceed $400 million in 2016. We have 43 R&D facilities with 1,000 R&D employees worldwide. In addition to internal development, we have followed the successful model of the technology industry by acquiring valuable R&D assets. Mr. Chairman, where we've made mistakes, we're listening and we're changing. Our Walgreens partnership is a key step forward, but we have more to do. Through internal development and acquisitions, we've developed a portfolio of world-class franchises. Like other pharmaceutical companies, we will sometimes adjust our prices, but our price increases in the future will be well within industry norms and much more modest than the ones that drew your legitimate concerns. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to appear today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Ms. Retzlaff, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Cummings, and distinguished members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to provide Turing's perspective on the issues before this committee today. Turing is a small, research-focused pharmaceutical company founded just 1 year ago. We invest in developing and commercializing important drug treatments for patients who suffer from serious and often neglected diseases. Daraprim is our principal current product. It's a prescription drug used to treat a serious parasitic infection called toxoplasmosis, which most often affects patients with compromised immune systems. Daraprim was on the market for more than 60 years before Turing acquired it last August. In the preceding 5 decades, there was no significant pharmaceutical innovation in the treatment of toxoplasmosis, and Daraprim remains the only FDA-approved treatment for this disease. Perhaps that's not surprising, since only about 3,000 patients are prescribed Daraprim each year. Daraprim presented an investment opportunity for Turing because it was priced far below its market value in comparison to other similar drug treatments for rare and serious diseases. After considering the pricing of comparable drugs, the value Daraprim provides in the treatment of a potentially life-threatening disease, the small patient population for Daraprim, and the mandatory discounts and rebates that apply to many who receive the drug, Turing made the decision to raise the wholesale list price, or WAC, for Daraprim to $750 per pill. As Turing's chief commercial officer, I was comfortable with that decision, first, because of our company's commitment to ensure access to Daraprim for every single patient who needs the drug, regardless of ability to pay, and second, because of our commitment to invest a large portion of net revenues generated from Daraprim in R&D for new and improved drug treatments. Let me address patient access. Most fundamentally, in terms of cost, it's important to realize that the wholesale list price of a drug is not the same as the price paid by patients, hospitals, health plans, or government programs. To our knowledge, no patient needs to pay $750 per pill for Daraprim. In fact, about 2/3 of patients get the drug through government programs that receive a discounted price of 1 penny per pill. Beyond the discounts available through government programs, Turing has taken several additional steps to ensure affordable access to Daraprim. We fund a patient assistance program that offers Daraprim free of charge to qualified uninsured patients with incomes at or below 500% of the federal poverty level, well above industry standard for patient assistance eligibility. We provide copay support to help insured patients meet their copay obligations, and we fund a bridge program to give those with commercial insurance a supply of Daraprim at no charge if there are delays in coverage. In response to concerns about cost, and after consulting with key stakeholders, Turing announced in November that we would discount the price of Daraprim to hospitals by up to 50%. That's especially important because hospitals are the first to treat 80% of patients with the most common form of toxoplasmosis. We've also begun offering Daraprim to hospitals in a smaller 30-pill bottle, which can help to ensure availability and lower the cost burden for hospitals. There have been challenges with patient access, particularly in the first weeks after Turing acquired the drug. To the best of our knowledge, most of those challenges involve deficiencies in distribution that were unrelated to our pricing of Daraprim. Since then, we have worked hard to improve and expand the distribution system, including through the engagement of a new specialty distributor providing streamlined access to more than 90% of hospitals. Of course, Turing expects to generate profits from Daraprim, but our net income is not simply passed on to shareholders. Turing is committed to bringing innovation to the treatment of neglected diseases. We invest nearly 60% of net revenue into R&D, a percentage far higher than most other companies. 36 of our 139 employees are dedicated to R&D, and our pipeline of research includes candidates for innovation. We're proud of our investment in innovation, just as we're as proud of our commitment to patient access. I believe the decisions made by the company have been appropriate and strike the right balance between patient access, innovation, and shareholder value. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shkreli, you did not provide the committee any written testimony. Do you wish to make an opening statement?
On the advice of counsel, I will not be giving an opening statement.
I want to ask you a few questions. What do you say to that single pregnant woman who might have AIDS, no income, and she needs Daraprim in order to survive? What do you say to her when she has to make that choice? What do you say to her?
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
You were quoted as saying on Fox 5 in New York, you were quoted as saying, if you raise prices and you don't take that cash and put it back into research, I think it's despicable. I think you should not be in the drug business. We take all of our cash, all of our extra profit, and spend it on research for these patients, for other patients who have terrible life-threatening, life-ending diseases. Did you say that?
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
Do you think you've done anything wrong?
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
I'd like to yield time to Congressman Gowdy of South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it pronounced Shkreli?
Yes, sir.
See, there you can answer some questions. That one didn't incriminate you. I just want to make sure you understand you are welcome to answer questions, and not all of your answers are going to subject you to incrimination. You understand that, don't you?
I intend to follow the advice of my counsel, not yours.
I just want to make sure you're getting the right advice. You do know that not every disclosure can be subject to the Fifth Amendment assertion. Only those that are that you reasonably believe could be used in a criminal prosecution or could lead to other evidence.
I intend to use the advice of my counsel, not yours.
do you also understand that you can waive your Fifth Amendment right? You gave an interview to a television station in New York where, if I understood you correctly, you couldn't wait to come educate the members of Congress on drug pricing, and this would be a great opportunity to do it. So do you understand you can waive your Fifth Amendment right?
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm vexed. He's been willing to answer at least one question this morning. That one didn't subject him to incrimination. I don't think he's under indictment for the subject matter of this hearing. So the Fifth Amendment actually doesn't apply to answers that are not reasonably calculated to expose you to incrimination. And even if it did apply, he's welcome to waive it. And I listened to his interview, and he didn't have to be prodded to talk during that interview. He doesn't have to be prodded to tweet a whole lot or to show us his life on that little webcam he's got. So this is a great opportunity if you want to educate the members of Congress about drug pricing or what you called the fictitious case against you, or we can even talk about the purchase of is it Wu-Tang Clan? Is that the name of the album? Name of the group?
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
Mr. Chairman, I am stunned that a conversation about an album he purchased could possibly subject him to incrimination. But if
Well, the gentleman is correct. I understand that Mr. Shkreli is under indictment, but it is not the intention to ask him questions about that topic.
So if I understand it correctly, we're not going to ask him questions that are going to be in the subject matter of his current pending criminal charges. And if we were to get close to one or in the gray area, he's welcome to assert his Fifth Amendment privilege there. And if we stay away from the subject matter of his indictment, he is, some could argue, has a legal obligation to answer under Kasgar versus United States, but certainly has the right to do so, as he did in the television interview and as he does quite frequently on social media.
Correct. We're trying to.
Mr. Chairman, may I be recognized for a moment?
No, you will not. No, you're not allowed to. Under the House rules, you have not been sworn in.
I understand, but he's making
No,
legal arguments.
you are not recognized. You are not recognized, and you will be seated. The gentleman from South Carolina is correct. We were trying to provide an opportunity to have a candid discussion about issues related to drug pricing. We now recognize Mr. Cummings for any questions he might have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, let me say for the record that I completely support your decision to bring Mr. Shkreli to make sure that he asserted his Fifth Amendment right before this committee. Normally, Democrats on our committee have accepted the assertions of a witness's attorney that his or her client is going to take the Fifth. But in this case, Mr. Shkreli made a number of public comments himself, raising legitimate questions about his intentions. Honestly, I did not know whether he was even going to show up today, so it's nice to see you. But now that he has invoked his constitutional rights, of course I will respect his decision. To Mr. Shkreli, since I have you in front of me, after trying to get you in front of this committee for so long, let me say this. I want to ask you I want to plead with you to use any remaining influence you have over your former company to press them to lower the price of these drugs. You can look away if you like, but I wish you could see the faces of people, no matter what Ms. Retzlaff says, who cannot get the drugs that they need. And by the way, it's the taxpayers. Somebody's paying for these drugs. Somebody's paying. It's the taxpayers that end up paying for some of them. And those are our constituents. People's lives are at stake because of the price increases you impose and the access problems that have been created. You are in a unique position. You really are, sir. Rightly or wrongly, you've been viewed as the so-called bad boy of pharma. You have a spotlight, and you have a platform. You could use that attention to come clean, to right your wrongs, and to become one of the most effective patient advocates in the country, and one that can make a big difference in so many people's lives. I know you're smiling, but I'm very serious, sir. The way I see it, you can go down in history as the poster boy for greedy drug company executives, or you can change the system. Yeah, you. You've detailed the knowledge about drug companies and the system we have today, and I truly believe, are you listening?
Yes.
Thank you. I truly believe you could become a force of tremendous good. Of course, you can ignore this if you like, but all I ask is that you reflect on it. No, I don't ask, Mr. Shkreli, I beg that you reflect on it. There's so many people that could use your help. May God bless you. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Shkreli, it's your intention to decline all answers to the questions and invoke your Fifth Amendment right?
Yes.
Given that the witness has indicated that he does not intend to answer any questions, and out of respect for his constitutional rights, I ask now that the committee excuse the witness from the table. Without objection, so ordered. We'll pause for a moment as Mr. Shkreli is escorted out. We will continue. Now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Micah, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Cummings, we've been around this committee for a long time. I don't think I've ever seen the committee treated with such contempt. In fact, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to know if, based on his response today and his actions, if he could be held in contempt.
It's not my intention to hold him in contempt. We had heard multiple statements from Mr. Shkreli prior to this hearing, everything from I can't wait to school Congress to I will invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. It's important for us to have a person like that come explain that and answer those questions in person. I wish he would have answered those questions. We had no intention of asking him things for which he was under indictment, but I'll entertain any suggestions that there might be, but at this point, no.
Well, at some appropriate time, I may move to hold the gentleman in contempt. That's very sad, and Mr. Cummings said he may be the poster child for greed and unfair pricing, and it's a very serious matter. And while he's the focus of attention and he's the villain, we have a lot of blame to go around. The pricing for drugs is, from all of these companies, is skyrocketed. Some of the information I have is prices have more than doubled for 60 drugs in the past year. And then a survey of about 3,000 brand name prescription drugs found that prices have more than doubled for 60, and at least quadrupled for 20 since 2014. Is that correct, Dr. Woodcock?
excuse me, Congress has not really vested any authority for FDA over
On pricing, right, we know that.
We do not follow that.
And you said about 88% of the drugs that are consumed out there are generic today?
That are dispensed, say, by pharmacists are generics, that's
Okay.
correct.
And the situation with their pricing, has that increased or decreased? What did you testify to?
The HHS recently released a report that showed for Medicare, about 2/3 of the drugs over the last several years, the generic drugs, decreased. The prices had decreased. But there's a few where prices have increased. So there's a group that has increased. And this may have to do with the amount of competition in those, for those drugs.
And one of the problems is the approval process, and you spoke of getting drugs out there and you have competition, the price can come down. And there, you've made some progress you cited today. Ms. Retzloff, is the company you work for owned by Mr. Shkreli?
He is a shareholder, yes. A shareholder.
Does he own what share, do you know?
I'm not sure what share he owns of the company, but I can check that out.
Well, you described a little bit different scenario on what's been publicized as Daraprin's costs.
Yes.
It's pretty sad that your shareholder would take that attitude. At least you did explain to the committee some of the pricing. But again, there are other companies and drugs, Alkertin A, an 1,860% increase, is that correct? Anyone know? And that's not your drug, is it? So it's another manufacturer who's just as guilty. Maybe not as arrogant, but just as guilty. But millions of Americans depend on medication. I brought mine, and I'm pretty fortunate. I've got coverage, but a lot of people's life depend on it. Mine is not that situation. But what we've seen here is unprecedented arrogance, and what we see is a situation where people who need these drugs are denied these drugs because of pricing and lack of competition. And I think we're going to see more of this because people take advantage of the system. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Maloney, for 5 minutes.
When you read the emails between Valeant and Turing, after you finish, you would not describe your business as a business, but as an exploitation machine. Your basic business model was to buy a company, fire people to save money, and then jack up prices to reach revenue goals. You set a revenue goal, and then you jacked up the price. Now, Ms. Ratliff, when you talk about discounts, it's really disingenuous when you raise the prices 5,000%. So my first question to Mr. Schiller is, when you were jacking these prices and sending your emails back and forth, did you ever think about the impact on patients, on hospitals, on public health payers? And did you ever think about it? And how can you justify raising prices by thousands of % on life-saving orphan drugs for which there are no competing manufacturers, no generic, no manufacturers? People are going to die if they can't get the drug. Did you ever think about how hiking the price on Daraprim, which is important in treating life-threatening infections and AIDS? Did you ever think about the people that would not be able to afford it? Did you ever think about it? Or the impact on the hospitals and the payers? Or your memos just show, the internal memos, you just said, this is the price we need to make, this is the goal of the profits we need to make.
Well, I can't comment on Daraprin. It's not our drug, but I will.
Well, then let me ask you another question, since you mentioned that it's from someone else. How is Valeant's conduct any different than the conduct of Mr. Shkreli's company? Is the conduct of your company and your business model any different?
Well, I'm not that familiar with their company other than reading newspaper articles. But as far as Valeant's concerned, Valeant is a global company. We operate in 100 countries. We have over 1,800 products.
We're not looking at the company. We're looking at your strategy, which from your own memos that I would like to place into the record show the business model was to set a goal, a revenue goal, the profit you would make, and that was all you did. Now, yesterday, in response to questions that were put forward by this committee and memos about Valeant's price increases, your company said Mr. Pearson made an inaccurate statement during Valeant's first quarter of 2015 earnings conference call, where they were clearly setting the goal, and let's raise the price to that goal. In light of this, why should this committee have confidence in the accuracy of your testimony today?
Well, the statement you're referring to, I think related to an email that I sent to Mr. Pearson, which was 100% correct. Our SEC filings were 100% correct. I can't tell you what Mr. Pearson's intent was, what question he thought he was answering, but as a company yesterday, we chose to clarify, make sure it was clear, and we put out that press release.
Well, he talked about, increasing prices on Ispurel in July of 2015 to meet goals of revenue. Well, did you increase the price of Ispurel on July 2015?
I believe yes.
You did increase the price. So on May 21, 2015, you wrote an email to him stating, and I quote Pearson, "Last night, one of the investors asked about price versus volume for Q1. Excluding Marathon, price represented about 60% of our growth. If you include Marathon, price represents about 80%. So, Mr. Schiller, price increases represented 80% of your company's growth for the first quarter of 2015. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And most of your growth is attributed to one strategy, and that is increasing the price of your drugs. And all of your memos, the only strategy I saw was, let's increase the price of the drugs, will increase revenue. That was your strategy, correct?
No, that was, in the past, there were examples where we bought older drugs.
Okay, I would like you to place that in the record, any strategy that was different from just increasing prices.
I thank the gentlewoman for her time. Her time has now expired.
I just would like to say, Mr. Chairman, increasing revenue and profits was their strategy regardless of cost and impact. It is a terrible example of American business, and I would say the American people are tired of paying the price for it.
Thank the gentlewoman. We'll now recognize...
Thank you for this hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Duncan, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Woodcock, I have a report here that from Tufts University, their Center for the Study of Drug Development, and it's dated November of 2014. It says cost to develop and win marketing approval for a new drug is $2.6 billion, and average out-of-pocket cost is $1.395 million. What do you say? What do you say about that? $2.6 billion, and it says it takes an average of 10 years to get a drug to market. What do you have to say about that? Is that any place close to being accurate?
Well, the economics community has various estimates of these costs. So those costs are in dispute, but it is agreed that it costs a great deal of money, and it takes a long time to get an innovative drug to the market. Some of the recent advances in science are shortening this time frame for targeted therapies and breakthrough therapies. However, in general, though, that time frame is accurate, and it does take a large investment to first find and then develop a new drug.
Don't you see that if a small company or an individual comes up with some miraculous drug, that they would be forced to sell out to some big drug giant to get a drug to market with those kinds of costs? And that's what many people think has led to this over-consolidation of the drug business, how it's ended up in the hands of a few big giants.
Well, the industry is changing rapidly because of the new science. Last year, we approved a large proportion of our new drugs were orphans, and a number of them came from small companies. So it is doable. And the drug development paradigm is in flux because of the new scientific findings.
Mr. Mayor, what do you say about that?
Well, as Dr. Woodcock says, the market has been changing toward more specialized drugs that are developed differently and marketed differently than drugs traditionally have been. I know from our perspective, we know the best way to get costs down is through competition. So the more products we can get on the market, the faster we can get them on the market, whether they're competing Me Too brands or generic competitors, the better it is for consumers and then the employers, unions, and government programs that we serve.
We all believe that there should be some testing to make sure that drugs are safe, but you can go ridiculously overboard on anything, and it seems to me that when it's taking 10 or 12 years to get a drug to market and it's costing $2.6 billion, as the Tufts study says, that's going a little bit overboard. Mr. Schiller, I have a very detailed letter from one of my constituents that I would like to place in the record, but she sends to me her cost of a drug that your company put out, Aplazin, and her costs went for 30 pills in December of 2013, a total cost, annual cost of $13,566. Cost per pill was $37. Less than 2 years later, the cost for the same pills had gone to $106.74, a 224% increase in 2 years' time. And also, I have a letter from another individual, a state representative in Tennessee, that says that the average pharmaceutical company averages spending over 20% on research and development, but that your company averages less than 3%. What do you say about this 224% increase in less than 2 years' time and the 3% on research and development?
Sure. When we price our drugs, we try and take into account the clinical value, the alternative therapies, patient access, among other factors. It is not an exact science. In a number of cases, we have been too aggressive. We're also trying to manage a bottom line to be able to invest in our research and development pipeline and to make the investments in expanding our manufacturing. I mentioned Rochester, New York, where we're going to put another $500 million to increase the capacity in that facility, as well as patient access. And patient.
Well, my time's running out. Let me just add that I think you need to do much more to hold down these costs. But I would like to also say that in all my time in Congress, I've served on 4 committees, been here 28 years. I've seen hundreds of witnesses and some very heated confrontations. I have never seen an individual act with such arrogance as Mr. Shkreli a while ago, such childish, smart alecky smirks, even turning away from Ranking Member Cummings to pose for pictures while the Ranking Member was speaking, and I think it just was totally ridiculous. I can tell you this, his lawyer better advise him a little bit, because a jury would love to convict somebody if he acts that same way while he's on trial. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize Ms. Norton for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It may have been Mr. Shkreli's antics that drew the kind of attention that gets us this very important hearing today, and I understand your testimony, Mr. Merritt, about competition and encouraging patients to go to less expensive drugs. I also appreciate what you said about more specialized drugs. And let me say this about pharmaceuticals. I think pharmaceuticals and the work of our companies is most extraordinary. It has not only saved lives, kept people out of the hospital. So I want you to know that I think there's great appreciation for the industry here, even for what is often given as the reason for the price of drugs. We do understand R&D. We do understand that more of the R&D is done here than done abroad, and then, of course, it costs less abroad. All of that. And I think Dr. Woodstock's last testimony in response to question made that clear, that the government understands it. That understood, let us go to a kind of paradigm here, Daraprim. This is a life-saving drug that is used for parasitic or indeed what could be fatal parasitic infection. It's known as Ms. Ratzliff, who took over from Mr. Shkreli. It's known as toxoplasmosis. It's used by cancer patients, by patients with HIV. It has a relatively small patient market. Now, Ms. Ratzliff, Turing purchased this drug. And I've just said that I give all credit to the industry for R&D. But it is true, Ms. Ratzliff, if it is it not, that you did not do the R&D for Daraprim. You purchased Daraprim.
It is true, yes, we purchased Daraprim. Now, Daraprim was on the market for 60 years, and even after 60 years is still the only FDA-approved treatment for toxoplasmosis.
Now, isn't it interesting that for 60 years somehow, a company had been able to manufacture this drug for $13.50 per tablet, but when you purchased it, the tablet overnight went to $750 per tablet. To do the math, Ms. Ratzliff, that's a 5,000% increase. Is there any conceivable justification for a company that had nothing to do with the R&D taking over a company and then overnight raising the price so that it is, let's be fair, out of reach for patients and even some hospitals? What is your justification for that?
My justification is that there has been no new innovation, no new treatments, which we believe are critically needed, and we are reinvesting much of the revenue.
How much have you?
60%.
So you brought it. You immediately began to reinvest in the reinvestment was so large that you had to increase for those who are now using them. We're not talking about future users who are now using the drug. You needed to increase it 5,000%.
And we're also investing in other serious and neglected diseases.
Now, in spite we're talking, you're putting it all on this one, you're putting it all on this one life-saving drug?
It's not uncustomary for pharmaceutical companies to use revenues from one product to fund multiple programs.
Well, it certainly isn't, but why is it that when the committee, I drew some of the testimony from the committee that the documents obtained by the committee indicated that in response to this very widespread concern about this huge increase, Turing employed a public relations strategy to try to divert attention to patient assistance programs and research and development efforts. In other words, instead of keeping the price so that it could be purchased by patients in hospitals, you went to what I think even some of your testimony was about, and that is to patient assistance programs to try to obscure the price. Is that your strategy for raising prices and then essentially trying to obscure those raises by telling people that's all right, we'll give you a 50% increase, discount, but for the rest of you, we're using this money ourselves for R&D. Is that your strategy?
No, it is not. Our intent behind our public relations strategy was to correct any miscommunication. Again, as I said in my testimony, 2/3 of patients, the most vulnerable toxoplasmosis patients, can access our product for a penny a pill. That is 2/3. 23% are covered by commercial insurance. For those patients, we cap their copays at $10. We are absolutely committed and always have been to ensuring every single patient who needs Daraprim gets it.
That ain't true, but we'll talk some more about that. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Wahlberg, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having this hearing. I think we can all agree on the importance to pursue life-saving treatments and cures to the illnesses like cancer, et cetera, that affect our communities, our neighbors, our families, our friends. We can also agree that we want individuals to have access to these treatments at an affordable price. The question, of course, today is how do we do that? Unfortunately, under the President's health care law, we've seen drug costs spike. We've all heard that back in our districts. Congress needs to push back, needs to create an environment that promotes innovation, increases competition, which will bring down costs and increase access to prescription drugs. We have our fault in the process. But so far, we've acted to approve more than $2 billion in additional funding for NIH. Good thing. The first big raise in over 12 years to boost medical research. Additionally, the House, the House, have acted responsibly and passed 21st Century Cures Act, which reforms the FDA approval process and would accelerate the discovery and development of treatments and cures. The Senate has not allowed that to go through yet, or the President pushed for it. And so, Dr. Woodcock, it's my understanding, and I guess I just want to delve a little more deeply into your responses so far. It's my understanding that the FDA currently has a backlog of over 4,000 new drug applications and a median process rate of 42 months. Can you explain to our committee why your agency is so far behind?
We were far behind when we started the generic drug user fee program. At this point, the number of applications that where the manufacturer hasn't heard from us, where we haven't picked them up, is 600. We have approved and
let me understand it clearly. They haven't heard from you, but I guess we're talking about approvals.
Well, in the past generic program, before we reformed it, generic drugs went through 4 cycles of review and back to the company and review. This is a very inefficient process. We are trying to streamline that process so we can get it right first time. The company sends in an application, it is an approvable application. Under that scenario, as I said, this year, 15 months, starting in October, 10 months. We still have to deal with the backlog, which we are cranking out approvals of the backlog, but they started in 2012 when the program starts. They're already 40 months old. They're not going to get any younger. So for the backlog applications, when we approve them, their time to approval will be more than 40 months. But these newer ones, we've approved drugs in 10 months under the new program, generic drugs.
Well, I wish you well on that, and that's the direction we want to see going, because we very clearly have seen here, we've seen efforts in the pharmaceuticals as well to try to get away from that perception, but we've also seen that they've used this backlog to capitalize on a system that allows them to pillage the market?
The drugs under discussion have been on the market for decades, times when there were no backlogs, and there was still no generic competition to them. There are other reasons that for a very small segment of the generic drugs, the 88%, is out there, but for a small segment of generic drugs, there is no generic competition. When we at the end of the first GDUFA program, will have eliminated this backlog and be in a steady state type of activity. There will still be problems with drugs that don't have generic competition because there are other reasons for that.
And probably expediting that will ultimately help have more competition as well. Let me ask you about biosimilars. Do you think that biosimilars can play a part in addressing affordability and a patient's access to the drugs they need?
Absolutely, and that is what they are intended to do, and we're very vigorously enacting that program. We've had a very vigorous response to the legislation that Congress passed.
So it's bumping up there. You believe that patient and healthcare professional confidence in biosimilars is essential for savings from biosimilars to occur?
I believe that's the #1 issue. We just recently completed with generics some studies of seizure drugs because after all these years, the neurologists still didn't believe that the generics were equivalent. Those studies showed no difference between the generics and the brand name seizure drugs.
Well, your efforts in moving that forward will assist that, I'm sure. So thank you, and I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to follow up on the gentleman from Tennessee's line of questioning. I thought it was very good. The costs are prohibitive in terms of trying to develop some of these drugs. We've had, Massachusetts and in the Boston area, we've been blessed. We've had 29 IPOs, small pharmaceutical companies, come to market in the last 2 years. So we do have some growth in the industry, and so those few big players are not dominating like they were before. So that's good for change. But in the case of Turing here, they just bought the drug, didn't do a lick of research, bought the drug, and as the gentlelady from District of Columbia pointed out, the next day went from $13.50 a pill to $750 a pill overnight. And that is disgraceful. There's not a lot of shame at the table today, but this is disgraceful. And it was well known that the impact would be great harm on the public. So, Ms. Retzlaff, after you, in August, increased the price of the drug by 5,000% for people who had no alternative, on August 18th, Tina Gorbin, a Turing employee, sent an email that you were CC'd on regarding the increase in the price. And she said that she wrote, and I quote, there are patients now waiting for product who have a $6,000 copay. Now, you just said that, and you're under oath, you're subject to perjury charges if you don't answer correctly. She's saying that these patients had a $6,000 copay, and you're saying they never had to pay more than a penny for a pill.
So allow me to provide some context. Yes, she did say there was a $6,000 copay. However, we paid the majority of the copay. The patient did not pay
everything but a penny?
We paid the copay up to $10.
Okay. Glad to get you on the record on that. This
I can
email
show you the
also
data.
shows that you were aware that your Daraprim price increase was resulting in incredibly high copays. Isn't that correct?
It's correct, which is why we introduced a very generous copay program to ensure the price increase
so this is another
did not
email
hurt
from
patients.
Ms. Gorbin. She sent another email to you and the Director of Special Pharmacy Development at Walgreens asking whether Turing would, and I quote, grant an exemption for those patients with copay over the approved amount of $10,000.
And our policy was to ensure that the price increase did not impair access for patients. And so, yes, we subsidized that copay.
You didn't want to impair access, so you raised the price to $750 a pill.
The access issues with Daraprim had nothing to do with the price. To our knowledge, they were based on gaps in the distribution network, which, by the way, we inherited from the previous manufacturer.
I reclaim my time. She asked the question because there was a patient in North Carolina had a copay of $16,830.
Yes.
That's what the patient was being asked for.
Yes, and we paid that down for the patient.
4 days later, on August 24th, the same outrageous copay was reflected in an internal Turing presentation on patient access. And this is your presentation. Patients with commercial private insurance experience increased copays and delays in claims approval and rejections. One has a 50% coinsurance resulting in a copay of $16,830. That's your own company in your own presentation what the patient is being charged.
Yes, again, we put that in the presentation to inform leadership that that was those were the subsidies that we were offering.
So I think we got a solution here. I think we got a solution. You know, Congress has the power. I would suggest that in our pharmaceutical regulatory procedure, our regulations, that we adopt a poison pill amendment. That when anybody acts like Turing is acting, in increasing the price from $13.50 to $750 for a pill, Congress can suspend the exclusivity period for you to produce that drug. We can eliminate it the next day and contract with DARPA, our research, our government research labs, to produce your drugs at no cost to the consumer. That's what we can do. The problem is that it'll impact the good companies that are actually doing research, not the hedge funds that come in and buy a company and pump up the prices. I didn't ask you a question. I'm telling you what we can do. If Congress has the willpower, we can do that. Unfortunately, it'll hurt a lot of good companies, and you're trashing the pharmaceutical industry that's doing a great job on a lot of different drugs, from organ transplants to cystic fibrosis, good researchers that are out there doing great work. You're trashing that industry, and you're going to cause us to have to put heavy regulations on good companies, and you're probably going to choke off other drugs that will come into the pipeline. So look at the impact you're having. You know,
thank the gentleman.
Thanks for your indulgence.
Thank you. We're going to excuse Dr. Woodcock per our previous arrangement. We'll allow her to hopefully make her next hearing without any hesitation. As we change this nameplace, we'll now have Mr. Flanagan join us, also from the FDA, as was previously introduced and was also sworn in. So he too is under oath. We have Dr. Desjardins, who's now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, panel. Mr. Schiller, could you explain to us a little further how you determined the new price for Isopril and Nitropress?
Sure. After we signed the contract to purchase the assets, we re-engaged a pricing consultant that had been engaged previously by the prior owners. They made a presentation to head of our neurology division where this product was going to sit. The conclusion was that given the reimbursements for the procedures where Isopril was used, which were as high as $12,000 or $14,000 in some cases, that there was significant opportunity to increase the price of Isopril without impacting or without making it unprofitable for the hospitals.
Excuse me, so why were cardiology drugs put with neurology?
I apologize. It's our neurology and other division. So it's our neurology, and we have a number of other smaller therapeutic categories that are underneath that.
Now, both these drugs are generic, right? They've lost their patents.
They've lost their patents, but there is not generic competition.
Okay, so this isn't a drug that a patient can go to their doctor and say, hey, doc, I need some Nitropress, I need some Isopril. Is that correct?
It's in a hospital setting, part of a procedure, or in a clinic.
Right. So it's not the patient that's getting out their wallet and paying for this drug. They're actually in a hospital, and either their blood pressure is going through the roof, and the doctor has really no other choice but to use your drug. In several cases, this comes in a vial, right? And you raise the price of the NitroPress 252%. Is that right? $257 for a 2-milliliter vial to $805.
Correct.
So if you're laying there in the ICU and your blood pressure is going sky high, the doctor doesn't ask you if you want to pay for this drug. He just has to use it. And whatever you charge the hospital for, they have to pay it, right?
That is correct. It is used in emergency situations.
And Isoprel, same way. It's not a pill. This is a vial. And you raise the price of that 525% from $215 to $1,346 a vial.
That is correct.
And you don't ask the doctor, hey, I need some Isoprel. You got an arrhythmia in your heart and things are going, circling the drain in a hurry, and the doctor doesn't have a choice. He's kind of over in a barrel because there's no other competition here. So he has to get that drug. He doesn't have another choice.
Well, there are substitutes, and the volumes have gone down over 30% since we acquired those drugs.
So you're saying that you raised one 212% and one 525%, but you've been so gracious as to drop the price 30%?
Well, we have gone to the hospitals that have the largest users, that have large cardiac departments, who would be the most impacted, to make sure that they're got a significant discount. I think also when you look at our overall portfolio, we've tried to address the issue of price by reducing the prices on our dermatology and ophthalmology products by 10% and by dramatically increasing the amount of patient.
Well, that's probably falling deaf ears. I did pick up something in your opening statement where you said the patient doesn't really pay this, so they don't really feel the sting. But I think anyone who's been a patient comes home from the hospital, they know they get a really big bill. And somewhere in that bill is Isoprel or NitroPress if it was used. And so the patient does end up paying for that drug in the end, correct?
It is paid as part of the procedure. So, I mean, somebody at the end pays it. I would add, though, that these types of transactions, Isoprel and NitroPress, in the past we have purchased some drugs like this where there was no generic competition. We raised the price, as you mentioned. We were too aggressive. And we are not.
Maybe way too aggressive.
We are not going to be looking for those kinds of acquisitions going forward.
Yeah. Mr. Ratzlaff, you also kind of did the same thing with your drug. It's a unique drug, and people don't have much of a choice. But you know, in your opening statement, it sounded like maybe you were doing people a favor. You're giving it to them for a penny, or they're getting it free. You're making a lot of money. I mean, Mr. Shkreli wouldn't even answer a question. He was so ashamed of himself. And you're basically saying that, you know, you're doing these people a favor. You're knocking off their $10 copays and all that. But bottom line is your company made a heck of a lot of money on this drug, and there's only a handful of patients that need it. Don't you think that maybe you can do a little better?
We didn't make a lot of money on the drug, actually. I believe the committee has our financial statements. I don't want to share that information because it's confidential, but you will see that, you know, Turing is operating at a loss.
Okay, well, I just say, you know, people are really hurting right now. They're seeing increased premiums, they're seeing increased deductibles, and, you know, this type of thing doesn't help. It's like if one gas station has gas and all the other ones run out, that gas station can jack the price and people have to pay it, but they're not going to think much of that gas station. I think you guys are at risk of the same thing.
Yes.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for calling this hearing. To go over this astonishing and unsustainable situation with the price of prescription drugs, a couple of things. One, Ms. Retzlaff, if Springfield Hospital in Vermont wanted to buy Daraprim, what would they have to pay you?
So we have introduced a hospital discount program.
Yeah, give me a number. What would they have to pay?
So for a 100-count bottle, it would be roughly $35,000. For a 30-count bottle,
so
it would
that's
roughly be $11,000.
So how much does that come to a pill? It's $1,100 a pill?
So $750 is the list price. We're offering discounts up to 50% for hospitals. So that is like,
1,100 is the discount. Right?
No, 1,100 is not the discount. It's 50% off of 750.
Okay, so if Springfield
$375.
If Springfield Hospital wanted to buy a pill, it would be $350.
Correct.
All right. What about if I had Blue Cross Blue Shield and it was covered? What would Blue Cross Blue Shield pay?
So that would depend on what the copayment and coinsurance was. About 25% of patients on Daraprim have commercial insurance. So in the examples that were mentioned above, the patient would be asked to pay a copay of, say, $5,000, in which case we would pay down that copay so they didn't have to pay any more than $10 out of pocket.
So in your financial statement, you're saying if I had to buy that, I had a $5,000 copay, you would pay all of it except a penny?
Except $10.
Except $10, and we can confirm that?
Yes, you can.
All right. What if they had what if they were on Obamacare? What would be the cost for that pill?
It's on Obamacare. So, well, if they are on a Medicaid patient, for instance.
Well, Medicaid, tell me Medicaid and tell me Medicare.
Medicaid patients. So for Medicaid patients, as well as patients that are treated through the 340B programs, they can get the medicine for 1 penny per pill, and that actually represents 2/3 of Daraprim's business.
And so who pays the rest of that if the patient gets it for 1 penny?
That's the price. Nobody pays.
All right. Why isn't it possible to just have a price where anybody who wants to know what that price is can go to a website and see? Do you do that? Do you provide that?
We provide, as you know, a list price, but the list price does not reflect the price that patients pay, hospitals pay, that other government programs pay. From a government program perspective, there are often mandatory statutory rebates, which is why
I'm reclaiming my time. The list price is just a starting point.
That's correct.
So most people have no idea what the actual price will be after you go through the gymnastics that you've just described.
That's correct. That's the way pharmaceutical pricing works in the industry.
Well, yeah, and that's a mess in the industry. I mean, we've had a lot of outrage at the outrageous conduct here, and we can't underdo it. But the bottom line here is we've got a broken market, and there's a real challenge for us as members who represent the public that are getting hammered with this to deal with that broken market. I think Mr. Duncan's got a really good idea. Anything we can do to help with the FDA to streamline, we should do that. But on the other hand, you've got market power without competition, and it is resulting in rip-offs, most glaringly represented by Mr. Shkreli. And I hope, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ranking Member, we can have an action plan that would include what Mr. Duncan is talking about. It would streamline getting the drugs to the market. It would deal with these rip-off approaches where the companies are oftentimes extending the life of the patent to prevent generic competition, doing Me Too evergreening to imitate a drug that's on the market with slight changes that don't really increase the efficacy but increase the cost. Work on Mr. Stiver's bill to get generics to market faster. And actually, let's have some transparency in pricing. There's all this talk about how much cost goes into research, and that's a legitimate cost. We all support it. Incidentally, taxpayers, $30 billion to NIH, we mutually support. That's our contribution. But the bottom line here is that we know prescription drugs are life-extending and pain-relieving. They're good, but we're getting killed with the price.
Gentleman, yield.
I do
5
yield.
seconds. Hospitals are getting killed, too, big time.
Right. And employers trying to do the right thing. So I guess my time is up, but I think we've got a lot more work to do, and I thank the ranking member and the chairman of the committee for setting up this hearing.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize
I just have one item to submit for the record, if I can, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, I'm not sure what it is.
It's concerns regarding the pharmacy benefit management industry of paper by applied policy. Thank you.
Without objection, so ordered. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. DeSantis, for 5 minutes.
I'll yield back my time.
Mr. Walker, let's recognize Mr. Walker for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the time today. Thank you, folks, for being here and testifying on this panel. I want to go back a little bit, Ms. Ritzleff, and talk a little bit about what you said about shareholders.
Yes.
As far as Mr. Shkreli, you said that He is a shareholder, but you were unaware as far as how much he owned in the shares?
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head. That's correct.
Okay. According to our information, he is your largest shareholder of Turing. Would you dispute that? But you just are not aware of that. You don't know.
I knew he was a major shareholder. I wasn't aware that he was the largest shareholder.
Okay. As far as code of conduct, you know, most organizations recently, remember the LA Clippers, Donald Sterling got set down because of the way he behaved. I was the minister for 20 years. There's codes of conduct that we have to follow. Is that ever part of the discussion as far as the outrageous conduct that he's representing your country? Do you have anything in your bylaws or constitution, if you will, that would prevent somebody from being so outlandish in his behavior?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. So first, as you know, Mr. Shkreli is no longer the CEO of the company, and subsequently, our chief compliance officer just published a code of conduct for the organization, which again is customary for pharmaceutical companies.
But you just said he just published it. When was the date that he just published it?
She published it a few weeks ago. I can't remember exact date.
Was that code of conduct published to push back a little bit on Mr. Shkreli's behavior?
Again, Mr. Shkreli is no longer a part of the organization. The code of conduct was put in place to ensure that, you know, our current employees behaved in a manner that reflected our values.
Would you find it, I mean, I don't know, for me, I just find it odd that all of a sudden you have a code of conduct. So, but you say there's, as far as you know, there's no link with her institution of this code of conduct with the behavior of Mr. Shkreli.
So Turing is a very young company. We're just a year old. We brought on our chief compliance officer not long ago. We're still in the process of putting together all of our policies and procedures, and we just happened to get the code of conduct out a few weeks ago.
A mere 5 days after acquiring Daraprim, Mr. Shkreli was sending emails about the timing of the price increase. In emails dated August the 12th, Mr. Shkreli asked when the price of Daraprim will be updated in Red Book, which is a compendium of drug pricing used by healthcare, as we all know. He said, I need an answer ASAP. It took 3 days too long last time I did it, what he was referring to. When he says the last time I did this, was he referring to the 2,000% price hike of Thiola that he implemented at his former company, Retrofin?
I'm not sure, but I'd be happy to check that out.
So when could you get that information back?
Yeah, I can get that information back to you.
Maybe by the end of the week, next week?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. I'd appreciate that. I do want to come back, make sure that I'm clear with the something with the FDA, Mr. Flanagan, if I could. Earlier you said there was, Dr. Woodstock said there were 600 manufacturers waiting to hear back from the FDA on approval. My question is that 600 manufacturers part of the backlog? Are those all new? There's 40 months backlog that you're waiting to get to, and you're trying to reduce it from 15 months to 10 months. Can you explain what number, what column, who's the new manufacturers versus the old ones? Can you use the microphone too, please? Make sure it's turned on. Thank you.
Sorry. So, Representative, there's, let me see if this answers most of the question. There's basically two big buckets of work. An incoming submission, something that comes in right now, that's going to get a 15-month goal date. Beginning in October, it'll have a 10-month goal. Then there's a big pot of much older submissions. A lot of those had been at FDA before the user fee agreement started.
Sure. When we say big pot, can you give me a number value what a big pot is?
Yes, sir. It was 2,866 abbreviated new drug applications in October 2012.
And those rank back as far as 40 months or nearly 3.5 years?
So those were like 40 months after October 2012. And many of those had been very long pending at FDA before the user fee agreement even started, like 2011, 2010, 2009. So now, when we clear out the backlog the way that everyone wants, anytime we approve one of those old ones that's been sitting around, the approval time is very high.
Sure. And what makes you think you're going to go from 15 months to 10 months? Your goal, my time is expired, but if you could answer that, and I'll yield back. Thank you.
We made very substantial improvements to the program, like rebuilt the factory, and it is described in Dr. Woodcock's written testimony.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Conley, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Lord Almighty. Mr. Flanagan, just to try to understand how pharmaceutical research works, basic research, a lot of it's done by the government, isn't it?
Yes. Representative, I'm here. I'm just.
I understand. But I mean, your understanding of where research is done as a precursor to the development of approved drugs, it's usually done by the government, is it not?
I'm really a technical expert just concerning the Generic Drug User Fee Act. I'm sorry, I'm just not the right person to answer that kind of question.
Ms. Retzlaff, you, have I got that name right?
Yeah, you have.
Thank you. You, in testimony in response to Ms. Norton's question about how could you go from, $13.73, whatever it was, for a pill, to $750 in your new company, and you've had a hell of a first year as a company, just model for everyone. You said, well, we need to use that revenue to help finance research on other life-threatening conditions, drugs that address other kinds of diseases and life-threatening conditions. That was your testimony.
Other conditions as well as toxoplasmosis, yes.
Is it your testimony that the company you bought this drug from was not doing that?
The company we brought the drug from was not doing any research, pharmaceutical innovation research for toxoplasmosis.
Are you doing basic research?
Yeah, we're doing early research right now in toxoplasmosis.
Well, but you said other conditions as well.
Yes, we have.
So can you provide the committee with a list of these basic research efforts that this revenue is financing?
I believe we can. I'm not involved in the day-to-day operations of research and development, but I can certainly check with our president of research.
But it's your testimony on behalf of your company that that's what you're doing with this revenue,
That's
and that was
correct.
the rationale, or part of the rationale, for jumping the price up 5,000%.
Yes, I believe we provided the committee with our research and development spend. Is that correct?
Well, I'm being a little more specific.
Okay.
In answer to Ms. Norton's question, I would like to see that correlation. I'd like to see where that revenue is in fact going from this increase.
Yep.
Because that was your testimony, that it's funding other good things. And
That
the
is
only way,
correct.
presumably, we can do that is this $5,000 price increase. Let me ask you a question, a corny question. In your company, in Turing, did the public interest ever come up in terms of, by jacking up the price, we really could affect access? We could have unintended consequence on people's health, especially since the sacred trust we've got is a drug no one else produces. It's the only drug for this condition that exists on the planet, and we just bought it, we control it, and we've just increased the price 5,000%. Was there any discussion at the corporate level about the morality, the ethics of that in terms of impact on people's health and lives?
So as I said in my testimony, I was comfortable with that price increase, first because of the company's commitment to invest generously in patient access programs. Those are important. We didn't want the price increase to disadvantage patients in any way. And second, the company's commitment to reinvest into research and development. And I will just say that we believe that there is a need for a new and better treatment for toxoplasmosis.
Would you agree, whatever your motivation and your altruistic instincts, that from a public relations point of view, didn't work out so well?
We had challenges from a public relations point of view, and I believe it's because there was a lot of misinformation, and there continues to be a lot of misinformation out there.
Well, I would suggest to you, and I know he's no longer your CEO, but when you have an individual behave the way Mr. Shkreli did when he was CEO, and in a public appearance today, and in his tweets, he has put a pretty ugly face in front of the public in terms of the industry, its motivation, its profit motivation, its concern for patients, any sense of ethical responsibility. And I would echo what Mr. Lynch said. It has unfairly damaged a whole industry because of the practice of one CEO at one company. And I just think, I would hope it would cause a very profound reexamination about the practice of jacking up prices the way Turing did with this one. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Merritt, isn't it true that your organization, PBMs, Pharmacy Benefit Managers, isn't it true that 3 of your member companies control over 75% of the PBM market?
I don't have the exact numbers, but there are.
I have. It is 78% to be exact. 78% are controlled by 3 different companies.
Yeah, and they
3
offer
only.
significant discounts for their customers, too.
Mr. Merritt, are you aware of the term MAC, maximum allowable cost?
Yes.
You're aware of that. And you understand that that's a PBM-generated list of drugs that determines the maximum amount that an insurance sponsor will pay for a medication. In other words, they tell the pharmacy what you're going to pay.
Yeah,
that's what MAC is.
It's created by Medicaid, right, not PBM.
And there are no 2 MAC lists that are the same. Each PBM generates their own separate list, correct?
Right, kind of like PSAOs have their own list for how much
they choose the products they want on it, and they are the ones who dictate that. So on the other side, PBMs also have a MAC list on how much they will charge the insurance company. And that's a different MAC list. Is that correct?
Sometimes all the different companies are different.
Yeah, all the different companies are different, but they have one list here that they're going to reimburse the dispenser at. They have another list here that they're going to charge the insurance company that they're representing. So you got 2 different lists here. Don't you find that somewhat awkward, and don't you find that to be a situation where a PBM could distort the market greatly?
No, because that's a decision negotiated in a contract between a client and a PBM, and there are a million different kinds of contracts, including those, and if the client thinks it's in their interest to have that,
But the point is, Mr. Merritt, is that you're deciding what you're going to reimburse the dispenser for it, and you're deciding what you're going to charge the insurance company for it. Therein lies the difference. Are you familiar with the term spread pricing?
Yes.
You are familiar with that, and you understand what spread pricing is.
Yeah.
That's when the price of the drug goes up. It costs the pharmacy more to buy it, but yet you're still reimbursing at the lower rate. For instance, in Turing, when Daraprim was $13.50 a pill, if you had it on the MAC at $13.50, if you didn't increase that MAC and she went up to $750 a pill, you'd still be reimbursing that dispenser $13.50, yet you would be charging the insurance company $750.
No.
That's spread pricing. That's what's happening. Because you're not updating, the PBMs are not updating their MAC list.
That's inaccurate. MAC lists
That is accurate. If that's inaccurate, then let me ask you, Mr. Merritt, why is it that just recently, and let me quote here, at a recent hearing of the Judiciary Committee, one of your largest member companies, who I notice aren't here today, and I'm very disappointed by that. I'm sorry that you have to represent them. We invited them, I believe, Mr. Chairman. They decided not to come. Anyway, at the Judiciary Committee, one of your largest member companies testified in December that they have teams of people who constantly update MAC lists. Is that correct?
I don't know about that specific company, but industry-wide, PBMs update MAC lists regularly.
They update them regularly, and that was the testimony in the Judiciary Committee. If that's true, don't you find it somewhat odd that CMS found it necessary to mandate, to require that these MAC lists be updated every 7 days, and that 26 states have passed laws requiring PBMs to update their MAC list? Don't you find that somewhat odd if you got teams of companies doing this?
Well, you just don't know why that happened. Drugstores want higher payments. They may have lobbied for those changes and got them.
Drugstores just want to get paid what they're paying for it. When companies go up from $13.50 to $750, that's a problem. When we're only getting reimbursed, when they are only getting reimbursed $13.50. And that's where the spread pricing comes in. I noticed that the profits of the PBMs have increased enormously over the past few years. In fact, almost doubled. And I find that very disturbing, particularly when you're talking about Spread pricing. Let me ask you something, Mr. Mayor, and I want to switch gears here real quick, okay? And just let me ask you something. As you know, I formerly owned 3 independent retail pharmacies. I had a family member who got a prescription filled at my pharmacy. She got it filled at my pharmacy. Later on that night, she got a call at home from the insurance company encouraging her to use mail-order pharmacy. A mail-order pharmacy that is owned by the PBM. Now, don't you find that a conflict of interest when a PBM not only owns the pharmacy, but they're reimbursing here? They're setting the reimbursement? Is that not a conflict of interest? How can it not be a conflict of interest?
Federal Trade Commission looked into that and said there are no conflicts and these benefit patients.
Mr. Mayor, that is a conflict of interest. I've actually had experiences where I've adjudicated a claim. For those of you who don't know, adjudicate means my computer calls his computer. It tells me what they're going to pay me. I've adjudicated a claim, and it told me they weren't going to pay for it. They weren't going to cover it. While this patient was still in my lobby, they got a call from the PBM saying, hey, you can use our mail-order pharmacy. That's a conflict of interest. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Cartwright, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for calling this hearing. I'm obviously concerned about these price increases on a number of levels, but one of the levels is as a former hospital director myself. Mr. Schiller, because Isoprel and Nitropress are hospital-administered drugs, it is hospitals that are bearing the biggest burden of your price increases. Am I correct in that?
That is correct.
So last year, the Cleveland Clinic reported that price increases for Isoprel and Nitropress added $8.6 million to its budget. And Isoprel and Nitropress are both heart medications. Am I correct in that?
Correct.
Given the choice between paying higher prices and risking the lives of their patients, most hospitals choose to knuckle under and pay the price. Am I correct in that?
I assume that is correct, yes.
So by raising the price of these medications exponentially, you are forcing hospitals to make that decision between their budgets and essentially their patients' lives and well-being, almost like holding the hospital's own patients as hostages against them. Of course, Valeant was not the first company to raise prices. Valeant actually bought Isoprel and Nitropress from a company called Marathon Pharmaceuticals, correct?
Correct.
And Marathon Pharmaceuticals acquired the drugs in 2013 from another manufacturer. Marathon also raised prices in the 2 years it owned Isoprel and Nitropress by about 400% each. Marathon's price, its increase, had a net impact to the Cleveland Clinic at that time of $2.8 million. And the Cleveland Clinic is not alone in bearing the burden of rising prescription drug prices. The Johns Hopkins Hospital up in Baltimore sustained an impact of $20 million last year, of which $4 million was attributed to price increases for injectable drugs like Isoprel and Nitropress. These price increases hurt hospitals in ways that reach far beyond the immediate care of patients. They also divert much-needed funding from research and other programs and technologies that improve care. Look, the truth is hospitals are struggling in this country. We have to keep hospitals alive. There's no greater impact to your health care than when your local community hospital has to close. I've seen this. They trim their budgets, they absorb these price increases, they absorb the cost of uninsured care, and they absorb it, and they absorb it, and they absorb it until they can't absorb it anymore, and they can't cut back nursing and staff anymore, and patients' lives become endangered, and they have to close. And there is no greater impact to you than when your local hospital closed, so that when you're having a heart attack, it's not a 10 or 15-minute drive to the hospital. It's a 40 or 50-minute drive to the hospital, and that can be the difference between life and death. So, Mr. Schiller, I understand from information your company has provided to this committee that Valeant has spent a, quote, nominal amount of money on research and development for Isuprel and Nitropress. Am I correct in that?
That is correct.
Well, that's the usual vindication of these exponential drug price increases, that we need to do this because it's funding research. But you've admitted there's a nominal amount of money on research and development for Isuprel and Nitropress, the very drugs that are experiencing this exponential price increase. Let me ask you this, Mr. Schiller. Isn't it also true that one of the, quote, key elements of your company's operating philosophy is, and I quote, do not bet on science, bet on management? Have I quoted that correctly?
That is a quote from Mike Pearson. I don't know what the data is on that, but I would say that this company has changed quite a bit.
Mike Pearson at your company?
Yes, he is.
And you've turned over a new leaf since him, is that it?
No, I think if Mike were here, if you look at his quotes over the last year or two, he's changed the way he's described the company and our focus and emphasis on research and development. I'd also add, in the pharmaceutical industry, it's very rare to trace a dollar of revenue to a dollar of R&D. It's almost
Mr. Schiller, I understand that shareholder return is your primary concern and objective, but I say it is unconscionable to deprive hospitals of the resources they need to fulfill their primary objectives, caring for patients and developing new and better treatments for the future. Again, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your bringing this hearing and calling all of this information to light. And I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Retzlaff, you testified that your $750 drug, nobody pays that. Some people get it for a penny, some people get it for $20. So I want to know, how much am I paying for that? Because the rest of that is either coming from the federal government in Medicare, Medicaid, state governments, or is coming from an insurance company that is being funded by the premiums that I pay, and hopefully will never need that drug. So, I mean, you make it sound like nobody's getting hurt by this, but everybody in this room is actually getting hurt by these prices, are they not?
So there are only 3,000 patients in the United States that are treated with Daraprim. 25% of them are covered by commercial insurance.
Right, so that's my insurance rates, which have gone greatly up under Obamacare.
So the overall impact in terms of the budget for any health care plan is very, very small.
All right, but you guys are
pennies.
potentially setting another trend in the industry. Buy these orphan drugs and jack up the price, or go and buy a generic manufacturer that's the only manufacturer of a generic drug, which brings me to the FDA. You know, you're saying you're getting down to 10 and 15 months, but you've basically created a 10 and 15-month monopoly for anybody who's a single source of a generic drug to do that kind of price increase and name their price for that drug. Is that not correct, Mr. Flanagan?
Can you ask the question a different way? Can you clarify, please?
All right, so the amount of time it takes the FDA to approve a generic drug manufacturer, that if there's only one manufacturer in the generic market, they've basically got the 15 months it takes, and I'm going to argue that number with you. They've got an exclusive ability to sell that drug for 15 months at $1 million a pill if they choose to do that.
Right.
So what takes so long to do this? I'm not an expert in what's involved in approving a place to manufacture drugs. I assume if you can manufacture XYZ drug in a place, you've got a clean facility, there are no roaches on the assembly line. If you want to add another product, why should it take 15 months to get that approved? I assume you can test whatever drug they make and see if it is what they say. What else is involved there? And why? And if they do screw up making it, 1-800-BAD-DRUG is going to bankrupt the company.
So basically, to review a generic drug, there's the scientific and technical review, bioequivalence, chemistry, manufacturing controls, stuff like that.
So how much of this is really necessary, and how much of it is regulations that are, what color is the toilet paper?
So the reason we have 88% prescription penetration in the United States is because when you or your family go to the pharmacy to get a generic drug, that you can be confident that it's the same as the brand. A review.
But why does it have to take 15 months? How difficult is it to get their output, analyze it, and see what it is? I can't believe that takes 15 months. The TSA can, in a matter of seconds, tell whether or not I've got an explosive in my bag by just swiping something on it. I mean, isn't there technology there that'll make it faster and better? Why aren't we using it? Every day you delay getting a competitor on the market is a day companies can screw the consumer. All right, so let me ask you one other question on your numbers before I was out of time. When Dr. Woodcock was testifying, my BS detector went off when she said, oh, we've got our number of applications way down. But she also mentioned that a great many of them were, and I think her words were, returned due to technical defect. So are you artificially decreasing your numbers in wait time as a result of somebody turning something in without a T dotted and or T crossed or I dotted?
No.
All right, so what are those, well, give me an example of what one of those technical defects was going to be. I mean, I see it with the VA all the time in the casework I do. Well, you don't have this piece of paper, you don't have that, you go to the back of the line. I mean, my fear is we've got a bureaucracy at work here that is costing the taxpayers money and the amount we have to reimburse Medicare and Medicaid for, and it's costing the insured money based on higher rates they have to pay for their premiums, and the taxpayers are having to pay in premium supplements under Obamacare.
Mr. Chairman, do I have time? Can I?
Yeah, you have the time to answer. I'm done after this question.
Please answer the question.
You asked for two examples. One example would be if the application doesn't show that the generic drug would be bioequivalent to the brand. So we want to make it sure it's going to work the same as the brand. Another example would be that if the facility it's manufactured in is substandard and can't produce a safe quality drug.
Again, the amount of time this takes is, I think, criminal, and add to that we've got a tort system with plenty of attorneys willing to go after any company that screws up even the slightest. This has got to be fixed. Well, thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman makes a good point, and I plan to ask some further questions on this. But we'll now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Ratcliffe, when Turing, and I'm going to remind you that you're under oath, by the way. When Turing increased the price of diaphragm by more than 5,000% on August 11, 2015, you were hoping to avoid attracting attention from the media and the public. Is that right?
Yes, of course.
Yes, you were. Despite your best efforts, the price increase soon became a major news story. On October 8th, an outside consultant sent an email to a member of Turing's board of directors laying out a PR strategy. I'm sure you paid a lot for PR here for Turing to respond to this unwanted attention. The consultant suggested that the board remove Mr. Shkreli as CEO, and I quote, as early as next week, end of quote. The consultant also suggested that Turing reduce the price of diaphragm. Is that correct? Come on, talk to me.
I believe that's correct, yes.
You don't know? You're getting these memos with regard. Do you have an answer for me?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, so, okay. So he wrote, and I quote, the price drop has to be significant and tied to something. This cannot be seen as something that appears to be as arbitrary as a price hike in the first place. You remember that? Unquote.
Yes, I do.
All right. The consultant recommended that Turing issue a press release announcing a, quote, package of patient assistance programs for patients, end of quote. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Did you follow those instructions?
Not all of them.
All right. We're going to talk about that. The consultant also recommended that Turing, quote, specifically tie profits from diaphragm to the research and development of a new and more effective treatment for diaphragm patients. You remember that? End of quote.
Yes, I do.
And that's exactly what you're doing today. And the consultant also suggested a long-term strategy of, and I quote, forcing a focus on Turing as a research and development company, not a pharma hedge fund hybrid, end of quote. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Now, Ms. Retzlaff, this email was forwarded to you by a board member. Do you recall receiving it?
I believe I did, yes.
Okay, it seems that Turing followed most of the consultant's advice with one glaring exception. You never lowered the price of diaphragm. Let me read another email you received from Turing marketing executive on October 2nd, 2015. Since you're so concerned about patients and discounts, she wrote, and I quote, "The cause of the inpatient hospital issue is pretty clear now. It's price," end of quote. She continued to quote, and this is what she said, "We all realize that we need a solution as soon as possible, but we don't want to commit to something beyond the smaller pack that will potentially debilitate the business and risk future revenues," end of quote. Remember that?
Yes, I do.
Now, Ms. Retzlaff, this email indicates that Turing was aware that its price increase had created issues for inpatient hospitals, as Mr. Cartwright was just saying. It also indicates that Turing was unwilling to do anything to risk future revenues, including actually lowering the price for everyone. Is that fair? Is that a fair reading?
No, it's not a fair reading.
Well, give me what is a fair reading.
So yes, we did learn that price seemed to be an issue with hospitals. So then in November, we actually announced a discounting program for hospitals of up to 50%. And then based on feedback from hospitals, we also introduced a smaller count bottle to alleviate their financial
I'm glad you
burden.
said that. Now let's move on. Let me read an excerpt from an email that Ed Painter, Turing's head of investor relations, sent to Patrick Crutcher, the director of business development, on September 26, 2015. Mr. Painter asked if there was a lower price Turing could announce that would discourage generics from entering the market and generate positive PR. Mr. Crutcher replied, and I quote, "It's best we don't PR something like that unless it's something we are willing to commit to doing." He added, quote, "Only thing to PR is a patient assistance program and the R&D." Mr. Painter replied jokingly, and this is a quote, and maybe you can interpret this for me. Maybe it's millennial talk, I don't know. But it says, "My R's banging the D and my pap can't rap," end of quote. Mr. Radcliffe, do you know what that meant, what he was saying?
I'm sorry, I do not.
But this was sent to you. I mean, you didn't read it? You didn't ask him?
I read it, but I don't know what that last sentence means.
There are very real issues for people with compromised immune systems. And this email indicates that despite the promises of lowering the price internally, Turing has no desire to actually fix what it has broken. And the thing that really gets me, Mr. Shkreli, who just sat there, your former CEO, is that right? Walked out of this hearing a few minutes ago, and before he probably got out of the door, he sends a tweet calling everybody on this committee imbeciles. Did you know that?
I was not aware of that.
So instead, you all spent all of your time strategizing about how to hide your price increase behind positive PR and coming up with stupid jokes while other people were sitting there trying to figure out how they were going to survive.
No, that is not true.
And I've said it before, a lot of this is about blood money. And Mr. Schiller, one question for you. You said, and I quote, a few minutes ago, you said, "In some cases, we have been too aggressive in increasing prices." You remember saying that?
Yes, I did.
Now, just so that we can be effective and efficient in what we do, are you all going to be reducing prices?
We have looked across our portfolio, and we have reduced prices.
Are you going to continue to reduce prices? You said that you're learning your lesson. You said that Pearson has now apparently he has a new attitude. I want people watching this to know that they are not being ripped off.
We looked across our portfolio. We took a 10% reduction in two of our largest business units, our dermatology division and our ophthalmology division. We reduced by 10%, up to 30% nitropres and isoprel. We increased our patient assistance programs. We're going to continue to look at ways to improve access at affordable prices. At the same time, manage our business so we can invest in R&D and manufacturing in places like Rochester and Greenville, South Carolina. We have made mistakes. We grew very quickly. We're acknowledging those mistakes. We're going to change. We're going to be, a responsible corporate citizen and part of the healthcare community, and we've made changes.
So you're going to continue to make those changes? Continue to make changes?
We're always going to look to do the right thing, but we have made significant changes.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. I now recognize myself. Ms. Retzlaff.
Yes.
The proper role of Congress is not to micromanage a private company. It's not my role, and I do believe in the right to profit. I think profit is a motivator that does a lot of good. But I also do believe that it's imperative that people tell the truth, that they're ethical, that they not mislead the public, that they properly represent the truth. Would you disagree with that or agree with that?
I agree with that.
All right, let me show you a video. This is just a couple weeks ago. This is, I believe, on Channel 5. This is Mr. Shkreli.
If it's up to the company.
All right.
If it's up to the company, if you raise prices and you don't take that cash and put it back into research, I think it's despicable. I think you should not be in the drug business. We take all of our cash, all of our extra profit, and spend it on research for these patients and other patients who have terrible, life-threatening, life-ending illnesses.
Is that true?
We invest 60% of our net revenues into research and development.
That's not all of it, is it?
He may have meant profits. He may have misquoted.
No, he said we take all of our cash, all of our extra profit. What's extra profit?
I'm not sure what he meant by extra profit. What it could have meant is once we deal with expenses, just operational administrative expenses, then we take that money and we invest.
You're really testifying that you're losing money?
Yes, I think you have seen our financial statement.
Yeah, you're not losing money. You're picking it in hand over fist as fast as you can. Let me ask you about some of that.
Sure.
And first, let me ask you, are you planning another price increase?
No, I am not.
That's not what the documents show. We'll release them to the media, and you can fight that one in the public. But based on this, do we know who Adam Stone is?
He's an investor.
Yeah, and he wrote to Mr. Martin Shkreli, and he wanted the public relations to calm down, wanted the politicians to slow down a little bit. And Mr. Shkreli said, quote, "We can wait a few months for sure." It sounds like a planned price increase.
What was the timing of that email?
December.
December? Well, that was subsequent to that. Mr. Shkreli is no longer the CEO. So I will have final call on those business decisions.
Well, and we'll see what happens with that. Yeah. The company's been in business how long?
We started operations in February of last year.
So about a year.
Yeah, close to a year.
And within the first year, you giving out raises?
Yes, we have.
Giving out bonuses?
I don't believe we've given out bonuses as of yet.
Well, your spreadsheet said 30% across the board, everybody gets a bonus.
But we haven't paid out any bonuses.
We have this document from the agenda of October 14th, 2015. One person had a pay increase of $250,000 to $600,000, correct?
Correct.
Another person had a pay increase of $275,000 to $600,000, correct?
Correct.
Another person had a pay increase of $160,000 to an annual salary of $800,000, correct?
I'm sorry, what was that one?
Went from an additional $160,000 to $800,000.
I'm not aware of that one. But
we'll release it. You can look at it. It's from your agenda in October. Now, again, people can make a profit. They can pay exorbitant salaries. But don't come before the American people and say, and cry and shed a tear and say, well, we're not making any money. And don't have the person who's the major investor into the company come and say, we invest all of our cash into research and development. We have emails that show here they're not even sure if they're going to invest in research and development. The person wanted to check off and make sure that was even part of the plan. And it sounds like a contrived PR plan in order to do that. Do you know who Metro Yacht Charters is?
Yes, I do.
Why would you know them?
I believe we rented Metro Yacht Charters for a Salesforce meeting.
Yeah, for a party, $23,000. Did you spend money on fireworks?
Yes.
Did you spend money on a cigar roller for the yacht night, $800?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so don't tell me that you're losing money. Don't try to pretend and tell us that this $750 is justified when you got a woman who's got AIDS. And what is she supposed to do? She's supposed to tweet Martin and try to get that for a penny? Is that how that works?
No, that doesn't work. That's not how it works.
It doesn't work. I get it.
That's not how it works.
So who pays the $750?
You know, $750 is paid primarily by commercial insurers. That represents the minority of patients, about 25%. Again, that's a very small number of patients.
But it generates a lot of revenue, doesn't it? And who pays those insurers? Are they just the big bad insurance companies that are raking in all these profits? Who are these insurers? Who pays their money, who then you have to pay you?
I suppose it's big companies that are insuring their employees for the most part.
No, it's people.
And again, because there are so few patients treated with Daraprim, the impact on their budgets, the budget impact is very, very small.
What is your first year revenue?
This year's revenue, our gross sales were 98, our net sales were 20.
The what? 20 million, right?
20 million, yes.
Yes. That comes, and this is one drug that just services about 3,000 people. And then you wonder why the average person who's trying and scraping by and they see their insurance rates go up double digits, screaming high, it's because of people like you. That's why they're going up. It's one of the key reasons.
I will add, and I think I need to be clear here, is that Turing is a specialty pharmaceutical company. We are 139 employees, 36 of which are dedicated to R&D. We are absolutely committed to taking that revenue that we generate from Daraprim and investing it in next-generation treatments as well as other neglected diseases. That's a fact.
I think that is legitimately part of what you're doing, but what Mr. Shkreli is saying publicly, what you're putting out there to the public to say that you're losing money, it's not true. And if you're going to continue to lie to the American people, the Congress is going to continue to probe. I can investigate under the House rules. The House of Representatives, the Oversight Committee can investigate anything at any time.
Right. I am being truthful. I'm looking at our income statement right now and our operating profit for 2015.
I have additional questions. I've gone far past my time. Let's recognize the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Lawrence, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to, before I start my question, just state that heart disease and stroke kills 1 in 3 women, more than all the cancers combined. Personally experienced the miracle of medicine and the need when my husband had a heart attack. So I really want to talk about R&D. In the 2014 proxy statement filed with the SEC, Valeant reported that one of the key elements of the company's operating philosophy is, and I quote, "Do not bet on science, bet on management." And it's been reported, financial reports, that Valeant's R&D was equal to only 3% of sales between 2014 and 2015. Mr. Schiller, is this correct? 3% of sales is R&D?
This past year, it would have been about 4% of total sales, but a big chunk of our portfolio are consumer products or generics, which don't require R&D. If you look at our branded pharmaceuticals, the number is 8%. And then last year, if you look at what we spent to acquire late-stage projects, which we later commercialized, it was over $1 billion. So we have a significant commitment. We have over 200 active programs in R&D. We expect this year to get approval for a significant new glaucoma drug and a new biologic for the treatment of moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. And we have projects in phase 1, 2, and 3, which we hope would bring fruit and new products in the future. There's tons of risk associated with it, but that comes with the territory, and we will continue to invest in that portfolio.
3% for R&D, you said was $1 billion of that. What is 3%?
If you look at our total revenue, we spent around 4% of revenue. But again, we have a very significant percentage of our revenue, which is consumer products or generics, where there's no R&D required. So it's about 8% on our branded pharmaceutical business, which does require R&D. And then in addition, we spent $1 billion on acquiring late-stage products last year, over $1 billion.
Committee staff received an email from Dr. Benjamin Levine, who is conducting NIH-funded research on exercise intolerant and heart failure. And Isuprel, am I saying that correct?
Isuprel.
Isuprel is a drug that stimulates the beta receptors of the heart, natural pacemakers, and causes the heart rate to go up using the same biological pathways. Now, Dr. Levine uses this drug to conduct his research and has been impeded in meeting his commitments to NIH because of the increase of costs of this drug. He has attempted to reach out directly to your company to no avail. Here we have a doctor who's focused on doing real research for people's lives. Mr. Schiller, what should Dr. Levine do so that he can use this drug in his research to fulfill the requirements, perhaps extend the lives of individuals? What do you recommend?
Well, I'm not aware of that, but now that you've made me aware of it, if you would give me his number, I would call him tomorrow and make sure that we help him wherever we can, make sure it's in a compliant fashion.
Because, sir, you have to know the connection, your research that you're funding, but also if you are increasing the drugs that are being used in research, you must recognize the impact you're having.
Well, of course we do. And if there's ever a situation where we need to do something about access, that is something we're going to do. So I'm happy to talk to him tomorrow and see if we can rectify that situation. I'm assuming it's all compliant. I'm assuming we can take care of that tomorrow.
I just want to say this before my time runs out. In America, well, while we are a leader in the world of R&D and medical research in some areas, we have turned the focus from medicine being a part of healing of people to a profit-making industry. Every business should make a profit, but it has turned from profit to greed. And this is why this is so important to me. I know there are senior citizens who are making decisions between food and drugs, the medicine that they need to live. And then there's someone in your industry that's buying a yacht. And I want you to be able to be part of the American economy and pay salaries that will allow a basic and even an advance based on education, quality of life. But we are at the point where greed is not acceptable in America, and I'm very concerned about that.
Thank you. The gentlewoman's time has expired. Now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Meadows, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing, and further thanking the staff for bringing this to the attention because of the American people. It was obviously the work of this committee, of both majority and the minority, where we've highlighted this issue, but it's truly an issue that must be addressed. And the best way to address it is to put companies that do the kind of, to use a tweeted out word, imbecile pricing strategy, is to put you out of business. So the barrier to putting you out of the business, obviously, Mr. Flanagan, FDA plays a role in that. And let me tell you why I'm concerned, because I hear from a number of stakeholders that they're afraid to even give me the details for fear of retribution from FDA in terms of the potential approval process that we go through. And the reason why companies like this can compete is because there's no one to compete against them. You know, they're small little drugs, orphan drugs. They're things that for the average company don't pay. For the big pharmaceutical company, it doesn't pay. But there are thousands, I mean, to have, you know, $20 million sales, $90-some million sales that was just testified, lots of companies that would be willing to take that on, smaller companies. So Dr. Woodcock gave her testimony. Did you agree with all of her testimony, Mr. Flanagan? Turn on your mic.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you agreed with her. She testified also in the Senate just a few days ago, and so are you familiar with her testimony there?
Yes, sir.
So I guess the question with that Senate testimony, we're talking about all the progress we're making and how we're 90% and we've made great progress, but I look at her testimony and it looks like you've only approved 25% of the applications over a 3-year period. Do you call that a winning percentage?
So right now, it usually...
Yes or no, winning percentage? 25% over 3 years, is that a good track record?
I can't answer the question yes or no. It usually takes, on average, 4 review cycles to approve a generic drug submission. So it's not that way for the brand side. On the brand side, there's about a 90%.
I'm talking about generics. And so let's look at this. If you'd put up the first slide for me, one of the concerns I have is with the ambiguity, and we have this particular letter, which actually is a letter from Dr. Woodcock that says that in terms of the application process, that with certain types that they will go ahead and allow that application to be filled out with less than 12 months of stability data going to, it says generally we will allow it to happen with 6 months, and on ANDA drugs we will actually allow that application process to be started with 3 months of stability. Would you agree with that?
I actually am not the expert on stability. That's out of the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality.
So you're expert?
It's a different office than me.
All right. I thought you were the technical expert is what you just said a few minutes ago.
Unhappily, just in my
Okay.
space.
So would you agree that this is typically the way the FDA does business? That they get faster approval for generics in the application process?
I don't think that our approval...
Okay, let me cut to the chase. I've got 1 minute left. Put up the other slide, which actually is go on to case 2 slide, if you would. Here's my concern. I've got a number of stakeholders throughout North Carolina and across the country who are willing to compete with these two companies, and they're willing to provide the drug to compete with them. And they've been told by the FDA, well, we got to get a little bit more information. We got to wait for 12 months of stability data. Instead of going with their own internal data, if you look, it says a company initially submitted 3-month long-term accelerated process for 3 batches. Can you do that consistently for all these that want to compete with these kind of companies?
So I understand your question. It's the same issue. It's the stability issues are out of the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, which is just a different office.
All right, so let me close with this. is there anything the FDA can do to make sure that we can speed up the process so we can compete with companies who are willing to price gouge on a regular basis? Can you speed up your process, Mr. Flanagan?
You have 8, Mr. Chairman, can I answer? I don't know how the rules work.
Please, yes.
Two things. First is if a submission comes in the door and it's for a product for which there isn't generic competition or for which there's a drug shortage, we consider those to be priorities and we expedite their review like
well, that's interesting because I have a letter that basically is from Dr. Woodcox that would suggest that shortage is not part of your decision-making process. So you're saying her letter is wrong?
Well, I need to see the letter. We for sure consider drug...
We'll follow up on a number of other questions. I'm way beyond my time.
Gentleman's time expired. We do expect votes on the floor soon. So we'll now recognize the gentlewoman from New Mexico, Ms. Lujan Grisham, for 5 minutes. Over.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I really appreciate you holding this hearing. And quite frankly, I share my colleagues' outrage. I think outrage is actually too soft a word, given what we've heard today, what we knew before today, what we still don't know after today, about what's really going on to make sure that there is fair pricing, protected access from the patient's perspective to life-saving drugs and treatments. And while I want to talk a little bit in my statement and get to my question about FDA approval and making sure that we do everything we can here to give the right opportunity so that we're focused on the right thing here, which is patients. That's the right thing to focus on here. But in all the emails that you've had members read to you, and I have an email of my own, if I've got time that I'm going to read, that make it very clear, particularly from Turing, that FDA approval and that R&D, that none of those issues were issues that caused the price gouging that we're talking about today. So as we sort of figure out what we can do better, I'm really interested in what we ought to be doing to make sure that there's real accountability into an entire industry that has made it their practice to put profits, and not small profits, outrageous profits, to the patient. And actually, Ms. Retzlaff, you certainly indicated that really it's not patients who pay. You know, it's hospitals and insurance companies. You know, there's a lot of people that don't love insurance companies and hospitals. So we'll shift and try to shift the focus. Where do you suppose the majority of their reimbursements come from, Ms. Retzlaff?
Again, as I said, there are so few patients treated with Daraprim, and very few that are covered by commercial insurance.
You know, when you're dying,
the overall impact is very, very small. And to our knowledge, no.
So when they cost
insurers,
shift that, I'm going to interrupt you. So when 3,000 people have their HIV/AIDS drug shifted someplace else, and my copays go up, and my out-of-pocket costs go up, my hospital access goes up, and this country is underbedded in the hospitals, and do you know who's paying them? Medicare and Medicaid and veterans and TRICARE. And guess who pays for those? I do. Every member in this audience does. Every member of this committee does. I cannot believe that your indication here is that the cost really, in terms of the number of people who are impacted, is so small that that's not really the issue. It is the issue. And let's talk about a couple other drugs. Let's talk about another company. Let's talk about Gilead. Let's talk about the hepatitis C drugs, Sovaldi and Harvoni, which retail at $84,000 and $94,000 respectively for a 12-week course. So we can treat this drug, we can cure hepatitis C, but because of profit, we're not going to cure it. Instead, we're going to create an environment where people are going to have liver transplants. So I see a pattern here that is incredibly frightening for the overall aspect of getting a handle on healthcare costs, and clearly is a shift from moving from protecting patients in this design, and it isn't a result of R&D. I mean, we've got many emails from your company that would indicate that directly. We've just passed 21st Century Cures, which is another indication that Congress is very interested in making sure that innovation and research and development, and that the FDA approval without minimizing patient safety is as streamlined as we can. And yet, that isn't an indication, at least not as a result of this hearing, that that's really an issue about how we determine what drug costs are. Greed is how we determine what drug costs are. So here's my question. Given what you have stated today, and given the questions and the emails that we've provided during this hearing about Turing, would you say that the practices at Turing are the same practices for all pharmaceutical companies, or is this just really an issue for your company?
Turing Pharmaceuticals is a research-based pharmaceutical company that is committed to developing and commercializing treatments for rare and neglected diseases. As I said in my testimony,
so this is not the practice of everyone else, this is just your practice.
I can't speak on behalf of other companies, but what I can tell you is that we are an ethical pharmaceutical company. As I said in my testimony, I was comfortable with the price increase of Daraprim, provided the company was willing, and it was, to invest generously.
I'm going to reclaim my 5 seconds.
Generously in patient assistance programs.
This is how this works in this hearing. I get
research.
to reclaim my time. The issue is, I think it's clear today that that's not your intent or your motive. We've provided plenty of information here that would not just suggest, but clearly identify the opposite of that. Mr. Chairman, thank you for exposing these issues.
Respectfully.
Now I recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Heiss, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go real quickly to you, Mr. Flanagan, regarding the generic backlog and what Mr. Meadows was talking about. Can you provide a little bit more clarity as to how the FDA is prioritizing applications to expedite the review process?
Yes, sir. So there's a policy that's available online, like you can find it on the website, and basically certain categories of submissions, like first generics that could potentially open the market to competition, drugs that could mitigate shortage, PEPFAR or HIV drugs, and a couple other specific categories of submissions.
So it's based on the disease, the prioritizing. Is that what you're saying?
The PEPFAR ones are based on the disease. The shortage is just based on whether, whether there's a shortage out there in providers. And first generics, it depends on whether the market has already been, opened up to generic.
So there's no real standard policy?
Oh, there's a standard policy.
All right. How long is 4 review cycles?
It's hard to answer that question because it depends on how long it takes the applicant to respond back to us.
Okay, the targeted action dates, they're assigned, and yet they're aspirational, non-committal. What's the point of having a targeted action date if it basically means nothing?
Well, industry very strongly requested them for the following reason. So we have this new user fee program. Beginning in year 3 of it, you get a goal date that tells you when we're going to act in your submission. But for everything prior to year 3, there were no goal dates. Industry needed some kind of information so they could plan product launches and conduct other types of business planning, and they strongly requested that we disclose to them what our aspirational.
But is it true that these dates really are virtually meaningless because there's no commitment there?
No.
All right, so, well, according to what you said, they're aspirational, they're non-committal, and it appears we've got months and months and months, 15 months plus before we ever get these prioritized and get something going, so the targeted action dates basically are meaningless.
Well, again, Congressman, industry strongly requested that we do this.
We're all requesting something be done, and that's the problem. You have these targeted dates, but nothing. The backlog is not getting any better. It's getting worse.
No, the target action dates say when we're going to take action on each of the submissions in the backlog. It's a way of organizing the backlog and disclosing to all the companies who have submissions in there, here's when we think when we're going to move on your submission.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I've got other questions, but I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to my colleague from Georgia, Mr. Carter.
Thank the gentleman from Georgia. Ms. Resleff, when Turing bought Daraprim, was it a specialty medication then? No, it was not.
It depends how you define a specialty
medication. I define a specialty medication as one that is available only through specialty pharmacies. You said yourself that access to Daraprim was a problem when the price went up. And the only way that I reclaim my time. When the price went up, it became distributed only through specialty pharmacies. I cannot, at my pharmacy, I cannot buy it. It did. You created a specialty medication, and you did it intentionally because you had a limited market at only 3,000 patients, and you knew you weren't going to be able to make a profit unless you went up on that drug, and it became a specialty medication. You abused the system is what you did. A PBM owns a specialty pharmacy, and now you're using it only through specialty pharmacies. You know, Ms. Resleff, Mr. Schiller, let me tell you, I've been practicing pharmacy for many years. I've spent my adult life dispensing medications to help people get well. I find it repulsive what you've done. I've seen advances in medicine that have been amazing to me. Since I started practicing, we've had advances that are just amazing. And I've always been amazed at the pharmaceutical companies. And when you come in and you rape the public and you give this a black eye, I find it repulsive. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you and your staff for bringing this hearing here. And for all those involved, you've been most cooperative, and I thank you for this.
May I correct his statement?
Sure, go ahead.
So when we purchased Daraprim, it was already in a closed distribution model, so we inherited that model from the previous manufacturer. And subsequent...
Then why did you say that access to Daraprim was a problem when the price went up? You said that yourself.
Access to Daraprim was a problem because of the distribution model that we inherited from the previous manufacturer. That's what I said. And subsequent to that, we have taken action. We have added...
You said when the price went up, it became a problem.
I don't believe that price was the driver of the access problem.
That's not what you said earlier. Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentlewoman from New Jersey, Ms. Watson-Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I want to follow up on Mr. Carter's line of questioning because I don't think I quite understand now. Before you acquired the drug,
yes,
was there a problem with access to it?
Yes, there was.
To your desire to acquire this drug, for which there was supposedly a problem with access, does that mean that those people who were suffering from, infections associated with HIV and AIDS did not have access to it the way it needed it?
So in June, that was 3 months before we acquired the asset, the previous manufacturer did what they went to a specialty distribution model. They closed distribution.
That was 3 months before you purchased it?
3 months before we purchased it.
What was going
on?
What was going on before those 3 months? Was it still that closed distribution?
No, it wasn't. It was broader distribution.
So was that as a result of perhaps conversations with your company in anticipation of your company buying this drug?
Absolutely not.
How are we to believe that?
Absolutely not. There's plenty of proof that arrangement with the specialty pharmacy originated, in fact, not with the previous manufacturer, but the manufacturer before that.
Yet Walgreens, which is the closed distribution,
yes,
right? Walgreens informed you all they're concerned about this drug's access to other patients, to other pharmacies, and et cetera. What did you all do in response to that?
So we've added a specialty distributor that that eliminates a lot of the red tape and distributes the product to roughly 90% of hospitals. We're in the process of adding additional specialty pharmacies to the network. We have worked with the different state aid apps to make sure that all the processes are in place so that they can access Daraprim seamlessly. And these are the most vulnerable patients, by the way, who are covered by ADAP.
So once you acquired this drug and you increased the costs associated with this drug, which it still eludes me why this was done other than to make somebody very, 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 very wealthy. You all anticipated that there was going to be pushback from human rights organizations, from advocacy organizations, and so from what I've read, and I believe some of this is obviously from some internal memos, it didn't seem that your company was at all concerned about ensuring that people who needed this drug could have access to it. It was about managing the message for your company.
No, that is not true. In
Well,
fact,
that's
the
the
actions we took reflect differently. We put in place multiple patient access programs.
It seems like you all
to
respond
ensure
to
that
a
they got
whole,
access.
thank you very much. It seems to me that you all respond to a whole bunch of pressure, and you have your serious issues that you have to contend with now. Your company has a very bad physical, public image right now, if you care to know that. I come from a state, New Jersey. We have large pharmaceutical companies, we have large universities, we do a lot of R&D, and the people that engage in research and development, they're not trying to make somebody a billionaire, they're trying to cure people. And that isn't even the issue here, because you all weren't trying to do R&D. You were manipulating access to a medicine that already showed the benefits of treating a very dangerous disease. And with that, I yield my time back to you, sir.
Thank you. We now recognize the gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Duckworth, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank both you and the ranking member for your collaborative efforts to raise this issue today. I want to start off by talking about a couple in my district. They are 73 and 74 years old, respectively, and they are stretched every single month to cover their expenses. The wife is diabetic, and she has a number of medical conditions, and for 2016 will probably lead to an out-of-pocket prescription price tag of around $4,600. Her husband's out-of-pocket expenses for prescriptions are going to be about $1,900 a year. Now, since they've retired, they are seriously anxious about their finances. How are they going to continue to afford to pay for their health care? And get this, the wife feels endlessly guilty because her medications are the most expensive. And even with some coverage, they together face overwhelming pressure of having to manage the family's budget, which after medical expenses is only about $20,000 a year. This is to pay their home loan, property taxes, as well as food and utilities. This is a crisis that is far too common across the country. And when I hear about stories like this from my constituents in the 8th Congressional District, and then I hear about $200,000 bonuses for executives in a pharmaceutical company that purposefully shut down distribution of a life-saving drug so that they could make that money, it disgusts me. It is absolutely disgusting. You know, and the Valeant and Turing witnesses have testified today, have used many different tactics to downplay the harmful effects of their price increases. They want to shift the blame and they want to shift the attention and say that, oh, the patient population is so small that the price increases doesn't affect the larger healthcare system. And individuals that they pay in on the more mainstream drugs, you're not being affected. It's just those 3,000 people, because there's only a few of them. And that it's actually the large insurance companies and not individual patients that bear this burden. But let me tell you, every one of us pay those insurance companies. My entire office is in Obamacare. We pay those insurance companies. So this hearing has really shown that this is hardly the case. And Ms. Retlaff, isn't it true that Turing's price increase led to astronomically higher copays for many of your privately insured patients?
Yes, it did, but through our copay program, we capped them at $10.
Really?
Yes, that's true.
Well, you know, your internal memo identified that, you know, one patient had an insurance copay raise up to 50% increase to $16,000, and others have copays ranging from $1,000 to $6,000.
Correct.
Ms. Retlaff, isn't it true that some doctors treating patients in hospital settings were forced to switch to secondary alternatives therapies because they could not access Daraprim?
I suppose that's true, but in response to that, we have discounted Daraprim by 50% and introduced a smaller bottle to better meet their needs, and that seems to have resolved the issue.
Well, the doctors are saying that they had to switch, and it was not their preference for what they would treat their patients.
Again, in the hospital setting, we're offering discounts now, so Daraprim can be available for those patients.
Can you confirm that before Turing owned Daraprim, it was widely available, covered by most insurance, and affordable? Before you owned it?
Yes, it was covered by most insurance. I don't know what you mean by widely available.
Okay. Mrs. Schiller, isn't it true that your price increases on Isopril and Nitropres have cut into hospital budgets?
Yes, it certainly would have cut into their budgets. The price increases were meant to stay underneath the reimbursements for the bundled rates, but it would have certainly hit their budgets.
Yeah, it absolutely did. In fact, at Johns Hopkins Hospital, their chief pharmacy officer in Baltimore said, these expenses deplete importing savings and result in less funding for research programs and technologies that improve care. This is Daniel Ashby, and he further says that the high cost threatens patients' access to critical treatments and create financial burdens on low and middle income patients. Mr. Schiller, these are only two of the many drugs your company owns and has increased the price of. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How many other drugs have you increased the price of?
I don't know offhand, but...
So you have so many that you don't even know how many other drugs you've jacked up the prices on everyday, hardworking Americans who are suffering from diseases. I mean, that boggles me. You're coming to testify before Congress, and you don't even know how badly you've socked it to the American public.
We have 1,800 products around the world.
Okay.
We certainly raised the price on some, and a number that you all have mentioned. We've acknowledged mistakes. We've also acknowledged that going forward, it would no longer be looking for those opportunities to purchase these older drugs. When I took over at the beginning of this year, we froze all price increases.
Have you returned the price increases back to where they were before you raised them? That's the important question. Well, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The time has expired. There's a vote on the floor. The committee is going to go into recess with the intention of coming back no sooner than 12:15. Committee stands in recess until that time.